All right, welcome everyone. It is June 16th, 2021. Thank you for joining. This is the SMI working group call to specifically discuss multi-cluster scenarios. This call does fall under the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be respectful in interacting with each other. And with that, if there's anyone new to the call, if you would like to introduce yourself to the community, please do so. And if not, if you are joining the call, please ensure that you just tag yourself on the attendees list so that we know that you showed up. So I didn't see, is there anyone new on the call that may want to introduce themselves?
Hey guys, my name is Yasin. I'm new to the call. I work for Intuit as a product manager for Service Mesh and API Gateway. And I don't have a specific agenda or something. However, I just want to sniff around since we have like big multi-cluster setup. So just want to kind of sense the dynamics here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Yasin. Okay.
Hi everyone. My name is Krishna. Yeah. I work for VMware. I'm into network virtualization. I also contribute to layer 5. So I joined because Lee pulled us in. Sorry, Lee, I'm putting you on spot.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Husseina, this is the right place.
Yeah.
So, by the way, just to add to what Husseina had just said, so she, oh well, I don't know what else to add that she didn't say, which is Husseina is, well, thankfully, a proud maintainer of Meshery. So, and she's full-time employed at VMware. And like some of the rest of us has had a bad run-in or with COVID coming around. So she and her family have, it's been a rough month, but yeah, I'm really thankful she's here.
Yeah, thank you for joining, Husseina, and hopefully you're staying safe. All right. I think that may be everyone. And with that, let's get into our discussion, which is not a real agenda, I guess. So what are we here to chat about? Is there any topics around the multi-cluster scenarios that people want to speak about?
Yeah, before we go to freeform discussion, and I definitely also I saw Nick on the call and wanted to maybe get any quick updates on what's going on with SDKs, just because we've had ongoing questions about those. But should we time box this? And Lee, do you want to just give us the 5 to 6 minute overview of what the topic is that you want to discuss in advance of next week's community meeting?
Sounds good. Do that later or do that now?
Let's do that now, just so that we make sure to get this on the record and figure it out, and then we can have open discussion.
Yeah, so there's two projects, Meshery and Service Mesh Performance, two projects that are proponents of Service Mesh interface, and are there to reinforce part of the same goals that Service Mesh interface have. They are up for proposal into the CNCF sandbox. And so there's positive feedback that the two projects are desired in the CNCF. And as they go in, there's an open question as to clarification as to how the projects align, underlap, overlap, reinforce. And part of the open question is, are they stronger together, all three of them? Are two of them stronger together? Or better, are they serving the community, the ecosystem better individually, together? And that's part of the open question as they go into sandbox. They're likely, at least one, reading the tea leaves, maybe both, there's an evaluation point to this coming Tuesday. Maybe they'll one or the two of them might go in. The open question, I think the one that's most related to SMI is service mesh performance. So I'll drop a link in and then be quiet to the presentation that sort of gives an overview of what service mesh performance is. It's a specification. So it's a specification that I don't know, that is complementary to SMI. And it's the one that's most closely related because they're both spec things that try to provide abstractions around service meshes and enable people to use them. And so it's the one that I would suggest that if we have time to talk about, that we would focus on what SMP is.
Yeah, that's a good overview. Phil, I know that we want to actually hit on the stated topics for this meeting, so we'll go to that next, I think. But I appreciate the getting it started in our minds, Lee. And just to clarify what you're saying, you believe that one or both of those projects could be a sub-project in the SMI GitHub repo, basically? Kind of like Gatekeeper went into CNCF as part of Open Policy Agent, like that?
Yeah, it could be. I think that I wouldn't project that one would go underneath the other, though. And so, but yeah, that they would be. Oh well, there's a couple of scenarios that like SMP is as significant in scope as SMI, and so. And can help breathe new life into some areas that SMI maybe has an under focus on. Meshery is a tool that both implements each of the specifications and provides conformance for one of them. It also does a lot of other things about managing a service mesh. And so all three could potentially come together. I don't know that I would suggest that, but that's part of the open discussion. I guess that's probably the first time that I've led the question, and I didn't want to.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for bringing this up. And this is definitely considered, or it's definitely worth chatting about more, of course. But thank you for getting that topic seated. Okay. Before I start quizzing Nick about SDKs, do we have any other specific questions that people want to bring up about multi-cluster? Or points of discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the RFC out there, and kind of forgive me, I'm just being spun up. This is my first the multi-cluster SMI call, but I guess as a community for what's in this document, and I'm just kind of looking over the user stories, etc. Are we in agreement of the full scope of the functionality in this document? I'm just trying to make sure I'm up to speed with kind of the direction and the thought process on solving multi-cluster and SMI.
My current understanding is this is like an initial in progress draft rather than something that has like full consensus yet at this point.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Is it worth, while we're here to go through it, or is it just known that people are going to be making comments to it?
I think we probably don't have the right people here with Delian and Michael not being here to have the best in-depth discussion. I know that I personally missed the meeting on June 2nd, where I believe there was some initial discussion about it. So maybe going back and watch the recording is what I'm planning to do to get caught up on some of the current state of it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'll do the same as well. And yeah, maybe we can make it for the next meeting. Maybe that can be an agenda item to just walk the dock. Okay. That's all I have there, Bridget.
Sorry, is there a link to this document in the meeting notes?
Yeah, I'll toss it into the chat. here real quick?
Ah, okay.
Yes, there is under the June 2nd discussion items.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I just put a link there to the Google Doc for you in the chat.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah,
So
over
are
to
we
you,
gonna,
Frieza. Yeah.
Phil, question, are we gonna ask people to put comments in by the time of the next meeting so that we can then move forward at the next, after the next meeting? Or what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking. Again, I'm just, unfortunately, I'm just getting spun up on it, so I didn't know where things were heading. But that sounds like a good plan for the next multi cluster meeting here, is to add any comments, agreements, disagreements, etc. So we can kind of talk through that.
Okay, and then we'll walk that doc at the next meeting.
Yeah,
With
that
everyone's comments.
sounds like a plan. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So then the other topic that I dropped on, mostly just because I saw Nick show up and thought, oh, Nick, is do you have anything you want to kind of preview for us about what's going on with the SDK stuff, Nick? Nick sits silently. Perhaps not.
So to be fair to Nick, he and I and 3 other SMP maintainers were on a call for the last couple of hours. So we just got on.
Wow.
So it's saying he's, I think he's doing dinner, but trying
Oh,
to
absolutely.
listen in.
I will defer that question to our community meeting next week. All right. Okay, for the folks who are joining and new, you can see that we're still working through some of the definition here. But this document has a great deal of info in it, so that's a great place to start. All right. Do we have any other further questions before, if we have the time, if we have an extra 10 minutes, we could have Lee walk through more of his topic. Okay, and yeah, and Nick says in the chat that he does not have an update yet. I will quiz him next week. All right, Lee, did you want to give us, you said that you had more that you would like to show us. Is that something you'd like to do at this point?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's help. I'll need to grab the screen share from you. Nice. So good. So Blake and I think Mike are aware of this work, which has been around, which has been in a project called Service Mesh Performance. The project itself, and so we were just having a maintainers meeting the last couple of hours. The project is, well, it's been around for a while. It's been a lot of kind of research in coordination with a couple of universities, and also been bolstered by input and direction from HashiCorp. Recently, it was sort of founded and based off of Istio's performance, God, what's the name of it? Performance and Scalability Working Group. So SMP is a spec for capturing and characterizing the performance of, well, a service mesh and its workloads and its infrastructure, because to understand how well you're running a system, or to characterize that, means to consider for the size of your clusters, your nodes, your service mesh, which one it is, what version it is, what it's configured to do, how frequently it collects telemetry, these things, how many services you're running, how many proxies there are, what versions those are, what versions of the applications you have. Like it's actually that challenge of like a long-winded articulation of your environments is one of those things that there isn't really a standard exchange over. Like hey, what is the, from one environment to the next, or just from the same environment over time, how do you compare those things? How do you speak in the same language fairly easily? So the concept here, part of the concept here is that it's not infrequently asked, what's the overhead of a mesh? To be able to address that in an unbiased way is part of the goal of this spec, to characterize that in a uniform way. To then also be able to use the same manner of describing your environment and its performance time and time again in your own environment is part of the goal of this spec. The spec has been being advanced most recently inside of the CNCF Service Mesh Working Group. Intel and Red Hat and HashiCorp represent the other maintainers of SMP. And we were just kind of going over roadmap items, of which I think it would be helpful to talk about here. One concept maybe before that is just, there's a notion that there's an appetite to create maybe an index of measure, a mesh mark, to be able to quickly convey by unit of the same measure, like what the performance of your system is. We've intentionally, some of the work that we've done with universities has been toward an algorithm that would capture, like, succinctly what performance score you're running at. So if you're running your systems at a mesh mark of 87 today, and tomorrow you're in 88, hey, what changed? Or rather, if you're able to characterize it that succinctly, you can actually have a conversation in which with others, and you understand how well they're performing and running without having to share 50-something performance charts or characterize that in different ways, that, oh, you were tracking those metrics, I was doing errors per second, you're doing errors per millisecond, you're doing, like, there's so much discord in those types of exchanges that standardizing some of that, providing a vehicle for standardizing that, is been at the crux of what's trying to be accomplished here. Doing it in a fair way and empowering each of the service meshes themselves to self-report on their performance. So while this is just a spec, the service mesh performance, any tool can go implement the spec and assess the performance of a system, of a service mesh, or of workloads that are running in Kubernetes, not on a mesh, maybe workloads that are running in Kubernetes on a mesh, to be able to characterize the difference between those, to be able to change small configurations of your mesh and then understand the impact of that performance. To be able to, so while this is a spec, Meshery is the first tool to implement the spec, and Meshery provides, well, the performance characterization of these environments. So Meshery integrates with 3 different types of load generators to let people have choice around how they want to generate load and how they want to perform analysis. Each of those load generators hammers on, if I can use that term, like, again, hammers on endpoints, your service endpoints that are on or off the mesh, performs analysis on them and reports that back in a common format, in this SMP format. Meshery as a tool then facilitates allowing people to compare across service meshes. Part of the point here is to allow, well, our ecosystem or the world to look at the performance of each of the service meshes in a uniform way, to the extent that that's possible, or at least minimally to allow each service mesh to self-report their own performance. And so Meshery as a tool is embeddable with actually shortcoming GitHub actions to let those individual projects integrate with their release process. And self-report in the process. So if you've ever visited like meshery.io, or actually, I guess better yet, smpspec.io, there should be, I don't know if it's on this site. Yeah, the total number of tests that have been run. So part of the goal here is that people will be able to, whether it's the service meshes themselves or just end users that are using Meshery as a tool, or any tool that implements SMP, that they can, begin, like I said this about 4 times, begin to exchange the way that they're characterizing the performance. For Meshery specifically, it's been collecting performance tests for those that want to send in their results for some time. And at some point, there'll be a nice, like part of S&P's charter is to do analysis on those results and hopefully help inform the world of like, or users or the service meshes or everyone of how they can tune their meshes, how they can what they should, whether or not they're running things well compared to their neighbor, like what's the average overhead, what's the average, more importantly, the other concept here is that what's the average value that's being derived. That's part of what S&P is trying to get to with Meshmark, is to help you articulate, not just in hard terms, like here's the overhead, it's taking 5% of my CPU or whatever that is, but it is also to give people a unit of measure to say, in softer terms, let me also factor in the OpEx savings that I'm, or the value that my team is deriving from the mesh, because my team didn't have to go manually instrument, some uniform metrics or some MTLS that the service mesh is providing. Rather, there's overhead in the mesh for MTLS, but that was a snap of the finger because we're using the mesh. Granted, there's overhead. So here's how we can discount that for the time savings of the maybe 6 months or however long it would take them to go handle MTLS themselves. That
I see Phil saying question, and I also have questions. So I know we're low on
I
time,
couldn't
but Phil,
figure
I
out
want to
how
hear
to
him.
raise my hand. I was trying to look for
Yeah.
how do you get that? Hey, Lee, this all sounds like super interesting, right? I heard you kind of rattle off a couple of companies that are involved. I'm curious, have you been in contact with anybody from Kinvolk? Because we've been kind of it's early. We started working with them, and they have a test harness that they've been using. I know that they've ran it against Linkerd, et cetera. So I'm curious if you're in contact with them, and then also, again, I'm just getting spun up, so I'm going to do some homework once we get off this call. But is the overall goal for S&P, is this to be kind of a baseline test harness for all meshes to show performance, and then maybe how they achieve it at certain maybe categories within functionality of the mesh? Is that it?
Yeah, that's on both of your questions. Yes. So
Okay.
I think it's
Cool.
Teo. Is it Teo? It's been like
Tilo. I think we
yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Tilo from. It's been like a year and a half. So yeah, Buoyant commissioned them to do the performance test. Buoyant was aware of it was S&P and Meshery at the time, and they needed something quick, and so they engaged with them. And then since then, as a matter of fact, Meshery is running a fork of Tilo's fork of WRK2, which does coordinated omission in terms of how it calculates performance. And so, it'd be great to engage more. And then to your second question, precisely, that part of what S&P is would do or is trying to do is say, not only is here a common spec for you to analyze yourself, the spec plus tooling to analyze yourself with, but also, for common work, or here's a set of benchmarks that those that are participating can run against within the CNCF. A lot of this has been latent and waiting for people to come pick it up, and thankfully, there's quite a number of people from Intel who are interested in picking up on going off to run a bunch of benchmarks using defining what those benchmarks are, like what the workloads are and what the configurations for the service meshes would be. They've had historically a lot more focus on Envoy than the mesh itself, but part of the goal of S&P is to do what you're saying, publish some common results of token workloads, if you will.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for the preview, and we will of course talk about this more next week. But this is Very interesting.
Bridget, do you know, is Michelle available at that time?
She's out this week.
Yeah,
I
or-
can't speak to her. I can't speak to her calendar for next week, of course, because she is out. So I can't ask her. But yeah, we will see. All right. Anyone? Phil, you wanna bring us home?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, before we close it out, is there any other questions and or comments that anyone wants to raise before we close out? Concerning multi-cluster and or S&P is what we discussed. Okay, we'll take silence as a no. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining. Again, we're gonna be meeting back every 2 weeks, is that right? Keep me honest there, Bridget. So our next call will be June 30th.
For multi-cluster.
For
We'll meet
multi-cluster,
next
yes.
week for SMI.
Yeah, so we're the off week of the standard SMI call. So yeah, next call will be June 30th. And I guess the to-do for everyone is please, if you got some cycles, read the multi-cluster RFC and please add your comments, and then that'll be one of the top agenda items for us to walk the RFC and go through all those comments. Thank you everyone for showing up, and have a good rest of your day. See you.
Wow.